Hey, what's up? This is Matt Harvey from Left to Die, Gruesome, and Exhumed, and you're watching Alejandrosis. And I hope to see all of you maniacs when Left to Die gets to Colombia. We'll be in Medellin, we'll be in Bogota, and we're going to be ready to rage. So I hope you guys all are as well. Cheers.
El gran legado de Chuck Schuldiner, guitarrista y cantante de la agrupación Death, es incuestionable dentro del metal extremo. Infinidades son las bandas que se han visto marcadas por las canciones de Death, que siempre tuvieron mucho de brutalidad, pero también una técnica bastante depurada. Y es por eso que llega a Colombia por primera vez el cuarteto norteamericano Left to Die, que se encarga de interpretar canciones de las primeras obras de Death. Hablo en concreto del debut Scream Bloody Gore de 1987 y el álbum sucesor, ese desafiante Leprosy de 1988. Pues bien, Left to Die va a estar tocando todas estas canciones en la ciudad de Medellín, jueves 23 de enero en el Grim Room, y al día siguiente hará lo propio en la capital en el Ace of Spades Club, 24 de enero. A manera de antesala, hemos preparado una entrevista para ustedes con el guitarrista y cantante de Left to Die, el señor Matt Harvey, para que estemos atentos a lo que será esta pulverizadora descarga. Sean ustedes bienvenidos a Alejandrosis. Bien, antes de partir quiero invitarlos a que se suscriban al canal de Alejandrosis, activen las notificaciones y si les gusta este contenido, un like es muy bienvenido. Left to Die se conformó hace 2-3 años aproximadamente con el interés de llevar el legado de Death a diferentes partes del mundo, mantener la llama de Chuck Schuldiner ahí muy encendida, y sí que lo vienen haciendo de gran manera por Latinoamérica. La acogida ha sido impresionante. En sus filas encontramos integrantes que hicieron parte de la historia de Death, así que no podemos decir que Left to Die sea precisamente una banda tributo. Es que allí está ni más ni menos que Rick Ross en la guitarra, un histórico de Death de sus primeros años, incluso cuando la banda se llamaba Mantas, y que hace parte también de la alineación que presenta el álbum Leprosy. También encontramos en el bajo a Terry Butler, que tocó con Ross en el álbum Leprosy y que bueno, que tiene un amplio bagaje en el metal pesado. Él actualmente también hace parte de la alineación de Obituary. Así que junto al guitarrista Rick Ross y al bajista Terry Butler, pues se suma Matt Harvey en guitarra y voz, junto a Gus Ríos en la batería. Harvey y Ríos hacen parte de un conjunto llamado Gruesome, que empezó su carrera hace una década con un sonido bastante definido hacia lo que ha sido el camino, la senda que ha dejado Death. Así que todo queda como en familia. Pues bien, contactamos a Matt Harvey en medio de esta gira latinoamericana. Los atendió muy amablemente y bueno, decir que además de ser parte de Left to Die, de la agrupación Gruesome, pues desde los 15 años de edad, Harvey conformó el conjunto Exhumed, que hay dentro del terreno del death, del grind, pues tiene un sello propio. La primera pregunta para nuestro invitado es acerca de sus expectativas de tocar aquí en Colombia con Left to Die.
I'm not gonna lie. I think my expectations are a little bit high. When we were in Colombia a few years ago with Exhumed, especially Bogota was one of the most memorable shows of the whole tour. That was an insane night. So, my expectations are that it's going to be a rager. I know we're all excited, and even after the first couple shows, we're feeling quite confident and feeling good and ready to fucking rock, you know?
Okay, wonderful. I know that you are a die-hard Death fan. And that your band, for example, Gruesome, is highly influenced by Death. How the idea of creating a Left to Die as a tribute to the work of Chuck Schuldiner come about?
Um, to, I guess, give the shorter version of the story, basically, there was a show organized a couple years ago in Tampa by like a Death super fan who had the idea for Terry and James Murphy to play all of spiritual healing with Gus and myself. Obviously, Gus and myself are both in gruesome, and Rick became aware of that, and he was like, "Huh, that's pretty cool," and it came off pretty well. And these guys are doing the parts pretty well. I wonder if they would want to, get together with Terry and I to do the Leprosy stuff. So he spoke to Terry, and then they came to us, and of course we were, very excited to do it. And yeah, that's pretty much, and then we just kind of went from there, and it was very organic, very DIY. There's no managers or social media managers or record labels even. With Left to Die, it's a very like ground level DIY thing. And the fact that we've been able to do a lot of shows and stuff with it has been really fucking great, and way exceeded my expectations of anything that would come from it. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's incredible because that legacy is immense. And I think that the value of what you do is to bring this to a new generation of fans with the best intentions. And keep in mind that Death never performed in South America. And although a huge number of death metal bands have visited us in recent years, they are not at fundamental acts, right? So
Right.
this is very important to keep that legacy.
And that's something that we do think about. And on one hand we think about it because we're very respectful of the material, and we're very respectful of the legacy. And on the other hand, we try not to get too bogged down with it because we are still like a band that we want to enjoy ourselves playing live. We don't want to sit there thinking about 30 years of Chuck's legacy and what it means to all these people, because then that's how you get inside your head and start making mistakes. But the way that we approach the material and the way that we play the songs and everything, it's extremely true to the original records. We've got half of the lineup of Leprosy. We have the half of the Scream Bloody Gore touring lineup. Rick was in Mantis and Death in the very beginning, helping to write Infernal Death and Evil Dead and all these classics, Legion of Doom and so forth. So, we know how the songs were originally presented, and that's how we want to play them. And I think that that's something that, as a fan, if I wasn't in the band, I would think was really fucking valuable, and that's where we try to come from. And just my job really is just to help Rick and Terry play the songs that they played back in the day, and to make the play the right things at the right time, and kind of, so people don't notice that it's not that it's not Death. Obviously nobody can fill Chuck's shoes, but hopefully we're carrying forward the legacy and bringing it to people that never had a chance to enjoy it in the first place.
Matt, have you ever seen Death live? And what is your favorite album by the band?
Yeah, I saw Death a few times back in the day. I saw them. Well, the first time I saw Death was in March of 1990, and I was 14. And my dad took my friend and I to the show. It was Death and Devastation from Texas, and my dad said, like, "Look, I'm going to be back to the gig at midnight, and you guys better be outside at midnight, ready to go. I don't care." And the show ran super late, and I remember, I think I saw like the first song and a half, like Living Monstrosity, and maybe the beginning of something else. And it was already like 12:15. I was like, my dad's going to kill me. And we went out, and my dad was really pissed off. The show was in a very dangerous part of town in Oakland, and he was like, "You're lucky I didn't leave your fucking ass in Oakland." But then they came back in October of 1990 with Pestilence and Carcass, and that was right before I turned 15. And that show I saw the whole thing of. That was kind of like a game-changing gig for me and all my friends, you know. Getting to see those bands at that time was really special. I remember being a little bit disappointed, though, because James Murphy had left and was replaced by Albert Gonzalez and from Evil Dead, who's a great guitar player. But they didn't play anything from Scream Bloody Gore, so I was a little bit sad about that. And then I saw, I know I saw him on Human at one point with, what's his name? Kelly Conlon on bass. And then I saw them once more. I forget if it was individual or if it was symbolic. And then I saw them on the last tour for Sound of Perseverance with Hammerfall. And this is all, I'm from California. I'm not from Florida. So this is all in the San Francisco Bay Area. And even actually in the October 1990 show, I met Chuck, you know, just a little kid, like, "Hey dude, I like your band." And I still have this old flyer for the Sadist record, Swallowed in Black. Someone was passing them out at the show because it was about to come out. And I got him to sign the back of the flyer along with the Pestilence guys, and I still have that. So yeah, I saw Death, you know, a fair amount of times back in the day. And you know, my favorite album, it's tough to say. You know, it's definitely between Scream Bloody Gore and Leprosy. I think maybe Leprosy, but then give me like 6 beers and then maybe Scream Bloody Gore, you know?
Okay. For that, please explain to people the importance of having in this band such historic figures as guitarist Rick Ross and also Terry Butler on bass. It's a dream come true, right?
I mean, yeah, for me as a fan, it is totally a dream come true, you know? And, you know, I've seen Massacre and stuff back in the day. And, you know, once Death All sort of got active, I kept thinking like, oh, why don't they get Terry and Rick involved? You know, like why? that's like a real missed opportunity, because I would love to hear those guys play these songs again. And, you know, I guess if you want something done, you got to do it yourself. But so as a fan, I'm really excited that this has come together. You know, Terry obviously is an absolute legend. He's, you know, been in Death, Massacre, 6 Feet Under, Denial Fiend, Inhuman Condition. He's been in Obituary now for like a decade. You know, he is the Florida death metal bass player, you know, and he's the perfect bass player for this material, you know. And I think because everyone is so focused on Chuck, I think what a good job he did in that band maybe gets a little overlooked. And when we jammed, I'd known Terry for a long time, and, you know, I was like, oh, he's a good bass player, that's whatever. But we jammed, and I was like, man, this really like feels really solid with his bass playing, like holy shit. And, you know, Rick, he has such a specific and unique style that was really, really influential for me and certainly my little group of friends when we were all kids, you know, learning how to play death metal. I love the whammy bar stuff, you know, because I think it creates a perfect balance, because Chuck on Leprosy is trying to become more musical, more articulate, more melodic. And Rick makes sure that it's balanced out by these sort of just obnoxious, like evil, you know, almost amusical, but guitar solos. And I think, you know, Rick is also a really underrated guitar player, because if you think about the work that he did in Mantis and Massacre, you know, this is all stuff before Scream Bloody Gore. You know, he was one of the very first people playing this heavier style of music, certainly in Florida, and, you know, one of the first in the U.S. it wasn't like after he left Mantis, he just didn't do anything. He was still writing like really sick, brutal death metal riffs, throughout 85, 86, whatever. And then he came back to Death to do the Scream Bloody Gore tour. So, these guys are both legends in their own right, for any old school death metal fan, and for them to be back together playing these songs. They've done some Massacre stuff, but they haven't got together to play these songs, before we did this a couple of years ago. These guys hadn't played these songs, in fucking decades. So I think it's hugely significant, and I feel very, very fortunate and very privileged that they trust me to do this with them.
Estamos conversando con Matt Harvey, guitarrista y cantante de Left to Die, ya antes de sus conciertos en Medellín y en Bogotá. En 2024 recuerdo que a Bogotá llegó una banda con un propósito muy similar: celebrar el legado de Chuck Schuldiner, las canciones de Death. Esa banda lleva por nombre Death to All, y en ella encontramos también a históricos de la carrera de Death. En este caso, al reloj atómico Gene Hoglan en la batería y al señor Steve DiGiorgio en el bajo. Ambos hicieron parte de Death. DiGiorgio más actualmente hace parte de Testament. Lo vimos aquí en Bogotá en Rock al Parque. Pero bueno, Death to All estuvo en Bogotá hace como un año. Yo no pude asistir a ese show, pero sé que también era, como les digo, celebrar todo lo que es la vida, la música de Death. Así que quiero preguntarle a Matt Harvey acerca de las diferencias entre Left to Die, es decir, lo que vamos a escuchar dentro de muy poco, y lo que hace Death to All, y cómo están las vibras entre dos bandas que tienen un mismo propósito. Escuchémoslo.
I mean, we've known all those guys for years. I mean, in Terry's case, he's known some of them for decades, So, and I have a lot of respect for what they do. I think that they're amazing. Basically, Death to All is, it's Steve and Gene and Bobby, who played on Symbolic, and Max from Cynic. And Max is an incredible guitar player, great vocalist. They do stuff from the entire Death catalog. Obviously, those guys are known for playing on the later Death albums, and they've got the sort of finesse and technical chops, and I think that's I think they really enjoy playing a lot of that more challenging stuff. What we do is very much it's similar, because obviously we have Terry and Rick, who's half of the Leprosy lineup, half of the Scream Bloody Gore tour lineup, but we just focus on the stuff that those guys actually played on. And in Rick's case, he co-wrote most of the songs on Leprosy and some of the stuff on Scream Bloody Gore as well. So it's more, what we do is a lot more focused and specific. It's just old school death metal, and presented in the old school way. It's very true to those early records and to that early vibe, because I know a lot of people who love sort of only the early or only the later Death. There's a lot of people I know who heard the band, after they split up for the first time. They're like, oh, I loved Symbolic, and then when I got Scream Bloody Gore, I was like, eh. And then I know a lot of people who are older like me that grew up hearing the early stuff, and I know a lot of people that are very curmudgeonly and are like, oh yeah, that shit's too wimpy, it's not heavy enough, I'm all into the whatever. So there's different camps of Death fans, and there's obviously a lot of people that like it all. I like it all. My favorite is the earlier stuff, but I like it all very much. But we're playing the old school stuff for the people that love the old school stuff. So there's not going to be any, there's no empty words, there's no flattening of emotions, there's none of that. It's just down and dirty Scream Bloody Gore, Leprosy, but you get to hear everything from Leprosy, and we play over half of Scream Bloody Gore as well. So I mean, it's like a very, for me, it's like really close to what I would want to see as a fan. So you're getting all the deep cuts, like Primitive Ways and Choke on It and stuff, songs that Death hadn't played live since 88, 89. I don't know if they ever played Primitive Ways live. I don't think they did. So we're more of for the deep cuts fans, for the specific old school people. And DTA is a much bigger tent. It's a broader thing, and they do a little bit of everything, and those guys are great and they do a great job. But like I said, I always thought not getting Rick and Terry and some of these other guys involved was a real missed opportunity on their part. So, that's what we're doing.
Estupendo, todo sea por mantener en alto la llama de la música de Chuck Schuldiner y la agrupación Dead. Left to Die va a estar tocando varias de esas canciones. Yo no me quiero perder Torn to Pieces, Infernal Death, Primitive Ways y por supuesto el tema que da nombre a este cuarteto norteamericano. Jueves 23 de enero en el Green Room de Medellín y el 24 de enero en el Ace of Spades Club. Ya lo saben. En los comentarios cuéntenme qué piensan ustedes de la agrupación Dead, qué piensan ustedes de estas bandas que tributan su música. Los leo. Mi nombre es Alejandro Bonilla, soy periodista musical. Les agradezco su tiempo. Suscríbanse al canal. Hasta pronto.